All right, class, settle down, Professor Zixnorp bellowed, his tentacles waving in what passed for exasperation among the Gruznaks. I've got an announcement that'll make your exoskeletons rattle. The classroom. A hodgepodge of alien life forms that would make a Terran biologist weep with joy or possibly terror, gradually quieted. Well, mostly. There was still the occasional squelch, chirp, or psychic whisper. We're getting an exchange student, Zixnorp continued, his eye stalks swiveling to survey the room. K.L. Ike, a mantis-like being with an uncanny resemblance to a walking salad fork, raised an appendage. Oh, is it from the methane lakes of Titan? I've always wanted to meet a methane breather. The professor's epidermis shifted to a sickly chartreuse. Not. Exactly. It's from a place called Earth. A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by the sound of several students falling off their anti-gravity cushions. Earth squeaked Blorgax, a gelatinous blob that communicated through a series of burps and bubbles. You mean? The Death World. The very same Zixnorp confirmed, his voice dropping to a whisper. Class, I need you to be on your best behavior. This is a unique opportunity. Murmurs of excitement, fear, and in one case, impending molting, filled the air. When will the human arrive? Asked Vreen, a sentient plant who was currently photosynthesizing near the window. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Ah, said Zixnorp, his tentacles twisting into what might have been a nervous smile. That would be now. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing the school's principal, G. Zorb, a being that looked like the unholy offspring of a jellyfish and a disco ball. Next to him stood a small, bipedal creature that most of the class initially mistook for some kind of primitive cleaning droid. Class G. Zorb announced, his voice resonating through the room, like an ethereal foghorn. Meet your new classmate from Earth, Sarah Johnson. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes wide as she took in the menagerie before her. She cleared her throat and spoke in perfect galactic standard. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. The class stared in stunned silence. This was the terrifying Deathworlder they'd heard so much about. She looked like she'd snap in two if you looked at her wrong. Zixnorp, ever the educator, seized the moment. Class, feel free to ask Sarah any questions you might have. Let's make her feel welcome. For a moment no one moved. Then, slowly, K.L. Eek raised an appendage.
Yes, K.L. Eek Zixnorp prompted.
No offense, K.L. Ike began, mandibles clicking nervously, but aren't you a bit small for a Deathworlder? I mean, I could probably bench press you. Sarah laughed, a sound that made several students flinch. Oh, trust me, looks can be deceiving. On Earth, I'm actually considered pretty average. Our gravity is about 9.8 meters per second squared, so we tend to be compact. The class erupted in a cacophony of shocked exclamations, ranging from impossible to, by the great void, how are you even alive? That's more than twice the galactic average, Blorgax burbled in astonishment. Yeah, it's no big deal, Sarah shrugged, then grinned mischievously. Want to see something cool? Without waiting for an answer, she casually walked over to Zixnorp's desk, a massive slab of neutronium alloy designed to withstand the various acidic, corrosive, or just plain weird biology of the student body. With seemingly no effort, she lifted one end off the ground.
The class went dead silent, save for the sound of Vreen's leaves rustling in shock.
Holy photon torpedoes, whispered Blorgax, his gelatinous form quivering in awe. Sarah gently set the desk back down and turned to the class, her smile a mix of pride and sheepishness. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have done that. It's just, you guys look at me like I'm made of glass or something. Zixnorp, who had been rendered temporarily speechless, finally found his voice. That desk weighs over 500 kilograms. Oh, Sarah said, looking genuinely surprised. Really? It felt pretty light to me. Must be the lower gravity here. The class erupted into excited chatter, with students falling over themselves to ask questions. How fast can you run? Can you breathe fire? Do you eat stars for breakfast? Sarah laughed again, this time causing only a minor flinch from the class. One at a time. I can't breathe fire, and I definitely don't eat stars. Although she paused, a mischievous glint in her eye. I did have a pretty spicy burrito for lunch yesterday. This comment was met with blank stares. Sorry, Sarah said. Earth joke. Um, to answer your questions, I can run pretty fast by your standards, I guess. Our top athletes can do about 45 kilometers per hour in short bursts. More gasps and murmurs. As for eating, she continued, we're omnivores. We can eat a wide variety of things. In fact, some of the stuff we eat for fun would probably kill most of you. Like what KL asked, leaning forward in morbid fascination. Well, Sarah said, tapping her chin thoughtfully, there's this thing called ghost peppers. They're so hot they can cause chemical burns. Oh, and we drink ethanol for fun. Ethanol, shrieked Vreen, his leaves curling in horror. But that's a solvent. Yep, Sarah nodded. We call it alcohol. It's pretty popular at parties. The class looked at her as if she'd just announced she enjoyed bathing in antimatter. Sixnorp, sensing the growing unease, decided to change the subject. Sarah, why don't you tell us about your planet's environment? I'm sure the class would be fascinated to learn about Earth's unique challenges.
Sarah's eyes lit up. Oh man, where do I even start? We've got everything from scorching deserts to freezing tundras. Our oceans cover most of the planet and are full of creatures that would give your nightmares. We've got storms that can level entire cities, volcanoes that can blot out the sun. And don't even get me started on Australia.
Australia, Blorgax burbled curiously. It's a continent where pretty much everything is trying to kill you, Sarah explained cheerfully. Poisonous snakes, venomous spiders, sharks, crocodiles, and these cute little bears called drop bears that fall out of trees and maul you. The class collectively shuddered. But that's nothing compared to our history, Sarah continued, oblivious to the growing horror on her classmates' faces. We used to have these huge lizards called dinosaurs. Some were as tall as buildings. They ruled the planet for millions of years until a giant space rock hit us and wiped most of them out. Aye. A planetary impact, Vreen whispered, his chlorophyll draining from his leaves. Yep, but don't worry, that was like 65 million years ago. We've had plenty of other near misses since then, but we're still kicking. The class looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between them. Humans were insane. Zixnorp, sensing the mounting tension, decided it was time for a different approach. Sarah, perhaps you could tell us about some of your species' achievements. Surely a race that can survive such challenges must have some impressive accomplishments.
Sarah's face lit up like a supernova. Oh man, where do I even begin? We've done some pretty cool stuff. Like we went from our first powered flight to landing on our moon in just 66 years.
The class blinked in unified confusion. Is that fast? Kale Ike asked hesitantly. Sarah looked at them, her excitement dimming slightly. Yeah, it's really fast. Most species take centuries, if not millennia, to achieve space flight after discovering powered flight. We did it in less than a human lifetime. The implications of this statement slowly sank in, causing a ripple of unease through the classroom. But that's old news, Sarah continued, her enthusiasm returning. We've got rovers on Mars, we've visited every planet in our solar system, and we're working on faster than light travel. This declaration was met with stunned silence. Impossible, Blorgax burbled finally. FTL travel is a pipe dream. The energy requirements alone. Oh, we've got some ideas about that, Sarah interrupted casually. There's this thing called the Alcubierre drive. It basically warps space-time around the ship. We're still working out the kinks, but we're pretty sure we can make it happen.
The class looked at her as if she'd just announced she could juggle black holes.
Zixnorp, his tentacles twitching nervously, decided to steer the conversation in a less existentially terrifying direction. Sarah, why don't you tell us about your hobbies? What do young humans do for fun? Sarah's face lit up again. Oh, tons of stuff. We play sports, watch movies, read books. Some of us like extreme sports. Extreme? Sports Vreen asked hesitantly, dreading the answer. Yeah, like skydiving, where you jump out of perfectly good aircraft for fun. Or free climbing, where you scale sheer cliff faces without any safety equipment. Oh, and there's this thing called bull riding, where you sit on an angry, one-ton animal and try not to die. The class stared at her in horror. But my personal favorite, Sarah continued, oblivious to the mounting terror around her, is scuba diving. You know, exploring the depths of our oceans. That doesn't sound so bad, KL Eek ventured cautiously. Oh, it's awesome, Sarah enthused. You get to see all sorts of cool creatures. like great white sharks. They're these huge predators with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Sometimes we even swim with them in special cages.
You willingly put yourselves in proximity to apex predators. For fun, Blorgax asked, his gelatinous form quivering in disbelief. Well, yeah, Sarah shrugged. It's not that dangerous if you know what you're doing. Besides, sharks aren't even the scariest things in our oceans. Wait till you hear about the giant squid.
The class collectively decided that they very much did not want to hear about the giant squid. Zixnorp, sensing the growing unease, attempted to change the subject once again. Sarah, perhaps you could tell us about your planet's history? Surely your species has some less terrifying aspects to discuss. Sarah's eyes lit up, and the class braced themselves for whatever horrors were about to be unleashed. Oh man, our history is wild, she began, practically bouncing with excitement. We've had empires that spanned continents, wars that reshaped the world, and revolutions that changed the course of our civilization. That doesn't sound too different from other species, Kale Ike ventured cautiously. Sarah grinned. Maybe not on the surface. But here's the thing, we did it all really, really fast. Like we went from horse-drawn carriages to landing on the moon in less than 70 years. The class blinked in unified confusion. Is that fast? Vreen asked hesitantly. Blazingly fast, Sarah nodded. Most species take centuries, if not millennia, to make that kind of technological leap. We did it in less than a human lifetime. And we're not slowing down. We're constantly pushing boundaries, inventing new things, exploring new frontiers. The implications of this statement slowly sank in, causing a ripple of unease through the classroom. But surely, Blorgax burbled, his gelatinous form rippling with concern. Such rapid advancement must have come at a cost. Sarah's smile faltered for a moment. Well, yeah, we've made mistakes. Big ones. We've fought wars that scarred our planet, created weapons that could destroy our civilization, and we're still dealing with the consequences of our industrial revolution. The class leaned in, a mixture of horror and fascination on their alien faces. But here's the thing, Sarah continued, her voice filled with determination. We learn from our mistakes. We adapt. We overcome. It's kind of our thing. Your thing, Kel-like asked, mandibles clicking in confusion. Yes, Sarah nodded. Humanity's superpower isn't our strength or our technology. It's our ability to face impossible odds and somehow come out on top. We're stubborn like that. The class looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between them. Humans were terrifying, but also impressive. Zixnorp, sensing a teachable moment, decided to probe further. Sarah, could you give us an example of this? Adaptability. Sarah's face lit up like a supernova. Oh man, where do I even start? Okay, here's a good one. Back in the 20th century that's pretty recent for us, we realized we were damaging our ozone layer with chemicals we were using in everyday products. The ozone layer protects us from harmful radiation from our sun. That sounds catastrophic, Vreen whispered, his leaves drooping in sympathy. It could have been. Sarah nodded. But here's the cool part. Once we realized what was happening, the entire world came together. We banned the harmful chemicals, developed alternatives, and started repairing the damage. And it worked. The ozone layer is healing. We literally saved our planet from a crisis we created ourselves. The class stared at her in amazement.
But that's just one example, Sarah continued, her enthusiasm infectious. We're constantly solving problems, big and small. We've eradicated diseases that once killed millions. We've created artificial limbs that can be controlled by thought. We're even working on ways to reverse aging.
Reverse aging, Blorgax burbled, his gelatinous form rippling with disbelief. Yep, Sarah grinned. We're not there yet, but we're making progress. Who knows? By the time I'm old, we might have figured out how to live for centuries. The class looked at each other, a mixture of awe and terror on their faces. The idea of humans living for centuries was both fascinating and terrifying. Zixnorp, his tentacles twisting into what might have been a thoughtful expression, spoke up. Sarah, your species seems to have a unique approach to problem solving. How do you do it?
Sarah's smile turned thoughtful. I think it's because we're never satisfied. We always want to know more, do more, be more. It's like, there's this quote from one of our famous scientists, Isaac Newton. He said, "If I have seen further..." It is by standing on the shoulders of giants that's how we see ourselves, always building on what came before, always reaching higher.
The class was silent, absorbing this information. But it's not just about technology or science, Sarah continued. We're constantly challenging ourselves in other ways too. We climb the highest mountains because they're there. We dive to the deepest parts of our oceans just to see what's down there. We send probes to the edges of our solar system because we can't stand not knowing what's out there. That sounds exhausting, KLI commented, his mandibles clicking in what might have been sympathy.
Sarah laughed. Yeah, I guess it can be. But it's also exhilarating. There's always something new to learn, something new to discover. And the best part, we do it together. Sure, we have our differences and our conflicts, but when it really matters, we come together. It's pretty awesome.
The class looked at each other, a new understanding dawning on their alien faces. Zix, his eye stalks swiveling thoughtfully, broke the silence. Sarah, you've given us much to ponder. But I must ask, with all this rapid advancement and constant challenge, doesn't your species ever rest? Sarah's laughter filled the room, causing a few of her classmates to vibrate in surprise. Rest? Oh man, that's a good one. We do rest, but even our relaxation is kind of intense by most standards. How so? Blorgax burbled, his gelatinous form rippling with curiosity. Well, Sarah began, a mischievous glint in her eye. Let's take our entertainment, for example. We create entire fictional universes for fun. We have games where we simulate building civilizations or exploring alien worlds. Some of us even dress up as fictional characters and pretend to be them for days at a time. The class stared at her in bewilderment. And don't even get me started on our sports, Sarah continued, warming to her topic. We have this game called hockey, where people strap blades to their feet, grab curved sticks, and try to hit a small disc of vulcanized rubber into a net while sliding around on ice. Oh, and fighting is kind of encouraged. That sounds barbaric, Vreen exclaimed, his leaves curling in horror. Sarah shrugged. Maybe a little. But it's super fun to watch. And then there's this other sport called parkour, where people basically treat cities like obstacle courses, jumping from building to building and doing flips off walls. The class looked at her, as if she'd just announced that humans enjoyed juggling antimatter for relaxation. But my personal favorite way to relax, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, is reading horror stories. Horror? Stories, Care-like asked, his mandibles clicking nervously. Yeah, we create fictional scenarios designed to scare ourselves. Monsters, ghosts, apocalyptic scenarios, you name it. We've probably written a story about it. And we love it. The class was silent for a moment, trying to process this information. Finally, Blorgax spoke up, his voice a confused burble. Let me get this straight. Your species faces unimaginable dangers on a daily basis, constantly pushes the boundaries of science and exploration, and when you want to relax, you scare yourselves for fun. Sarah beamed. Exactly. Isn't it great? The class looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between them. Humans were, without a doubt, the craziest species in the galaxy. Zix, his tentacles twitching in what might have been amusement, decided to steer the conversation in yet another direction. Sarah, you've told us much about your species' achievements and unique approach to relaxation. But what about your failures? Surely a species as driven as yours must have faced setbacks. Sarah's smile turned a bit rueful. Oh boy, have we ever. We've made some pretty massive mistakes over the years. Wars, environmental disasters, economic collapses, you name it. We've probably done it. The class leaned in, fascinated by this admission of fallibility. But here's the thing, Sarah continued, her voice filled with pride. We always bounce back. It's like, there's this old human saying, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. That's us in a nutshell. Could you give us an example? Kale-like asked, his curiosity overcoming his fear.
Sarah thought for a moment. Well, there was this huge economic crisis back in the early 21st century. The global financial system nearly collapsed. Millions of people lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings.
The class gasped in horror. But, Sarah continued, holding up a hand, we didn't give up. Governments worked together, new regulations were put in place, and people adapted. We came out of it stronger and smarter. And now, we're using technology to create new forms of currency and financial systems that are more resilient and equitable. That's impressive, Vreen admitted, his leaves unfurling slightly. Thanks, Sarah beamed. But it's not just about big global issues. We apply the same attitude to personal setbacks too. Like, there's this guy named Aaron Ralston. He got his arm trapped under a boulder while hiking alone in a canyon. He was stuck for 5 days with no hope of rescue. How terrible, Blorgax exclaimed, his gelatinous form quivering in sympathy. Oh. It gets crazier, Sarah said, her eyes wide with excitement. He ran out of water and knew he was going to die if he didn't do something drastic. So you know what he did? He amputated his own arm with a dull pocket knife, then hiked out of the canyon. The class stared at her in stunned silence. He removed his own limb, Cale, Ike asked, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. Yep, Sarah nodded. And then he went on to become a motivational speaker and continued his love for outdoor adventures. He even learned to climb with a prosthetic arm. The class looked at each other, a mixture of horror and awe on their faces. But that's just one example, Sarah continued, oblivious to the shock she'd caused. We've got tons of stories like that. People overcoming incredible odds, adapting to impossible situations, pushing through pain and fear to achieve amazing things. Zixnorb, his eye stalk swiveling in what might have been admiration, spoke up. Sarah, your species' resilience is remarkable. But surely there must be limits to what you can endure. Sarah's smile turned thoughtful. You'd think so, wouldn't you? But here's the thing about humans, we're really good at pushing past what we think our limits are. It's like, there's this thing called the 4-minute mile in our history. 4-minute? Malvreen asked, his leaves rustling in confusion. It's a distance, Sarah explained. For the longest time, people thought it was physically impossible for a human to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. It was considered a hard limit of human physiology. But then, in 1954, a guy named Roger Bannister did it. And you know what happened after that? The class leaned in, captivated. Within just a few years, lots of other people were doing it too, Sarah grinned. Once we knew it was possible, it became, well, not easy but achievable. That's how we approach pretty much everything. We're constantly redefining what's possible. The class was silent, absorbing this information. But it's not just about physical limits, Sarah continued. We do the same thing with technology, with science, with art. We're always pushing boundaries, always asking what if, and when we hit a wall, we don't give up. We get creative. How Blorgax burbled curiously. Sarah's eyes lit up. Oh man, in so many ways. Like when we realized how much damage we were doing to our planet with fossil fuels, we didn't just give up and accept our fate. We started inventing new forms of clean energy. Solar, wind, nuclear fusion, we're working on all of it. And we're not just stopping at saving our planet. We're looking at ways to terraform other planets, to make them habitable for us. The class stared at her in amazement. Terraform. Other planets, Cale asked, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. But that's playing God. Sarah shrugged. Maybe. But from our perspective, it's just problem solving on a really big scale. We've got a growing population and limited resources on Earth. So instead of fighting over what we have, we're looking at how to expand our horizons literally. Zixnorb, his tentacles twisting into what might have been a thoughtful expression, spoke up. Sarah, your species' ambition is staggering. But surely there must be those among you who are content with things as they are. Sarah's smile turned a bit sheepish. Well, sure, we're not all adrenaline junkies or mad scientists. Plenty of humans are happy living quiet, peaceful lives. But even then, we've got this drive to improve things, to make life better for ourselves and others. How so? Vreen asked, his curiosity overcoming his fear.
Well, take medicine, for example, Sarah said. We're constantly working on curing diseases, extending our lifespans, improving our quality of life. And it's not just about humans, we do the same for animals too. We've got doctors who specialize in treating pets, conservationists who work to protect endangered species, scientists who study the smallest microorganisms to understand how life works.
The class listened, fascinated. And then there's space exploration, Sarah continued, her eyes shining with excitement. We've got probes exploring the farthest reaches of our solar system, telescopes peering into the depths of the universe, and plans to send humans to other planets. And you know what's really cool? A lot of the technology we develop for space exploration ends up having applications back on Earth too, like what Blorgax burbled curiously. All sorts of things, Sarah grinned. Memory foam, scratch-resistant lenses, water purification systems, they were all developed or improved because of space research. We even have a special kind of insulation that was originally designed for spacesuits, but now it's used in firefighter gear and building insulation. The class looked at each other, a new respect dawning on their alien faces. Zixnorp, his eye stalks swiveling thoughtfully, broke the silence. Sarah, you've given us much to think about. Your species seems to possess a unique combination of resilience, ambition and creativity. But I must ask, with all this constant striving, do you ever worry about the consequences of your actions? Sarah's smile turned serious. Absolutely. We've made plenty of mistakes in the past, and we're always worried about making more. But that's part of what drives us to be better. We study our history, we debate ethics, we create safeguards and regulations. We're not perfect, but we're always trying to learn and improve. The class nodded, impressed by this mature response. Plus, Sarah added, her grin returning, we've got this thing called science fiction. We love imagining all the ways things could go wrong or right in the future. It's like a big thought experiment that helps us think through the consequences of our actions and technologies.
Science. Fiction, Kale Ike asked, his mandibles clicking in confusion.
Yeah, we create stories about possible futures or alternate realities. Some of them are hopeful, showing amazing advanced societies. Others are cautionary tales about the dangers of technology or the consequences of our actions. It's a way for us to explore ideas and possibilities without actually risking anything.
The class looked intrigued by this concept.
In fact, Sarah continued, warming to her topic, a lot of the technology we have now was first imagined in science fiction. Smartphones, video calls, artificial intelligence, they were all dreamed up by writers long before they became reality. The class murmured in amazement. Zixnorp, his tentacles waving in what might have been excitement, spoke up. Sarah, your species continues to astound me. You face unimaginable challenges, push the boundaries of what's possible, and yet still find time to dream and create. I believe we all have much to learn from humanity.
Sarah beamed with pride. Thanks. And hey, we've got a lot to learn from you guys too. That's why I'm here, after all. I can't wait to see what we can accomplish together.
The class buzzed with excitement, their initial fear of the human replaced by curiosity and admiration. As the bell rang to signal the end of the class, Zixnorp raised his tentacles for attention. Class, I hope you've all learned something valuable today. Sarah, thank you for sharing your insights with us. I believe your presence here will be educational for us all.
Sarah grinned, looking around at her new classmates. Thanks for having me. And hey, if any of you want to know more about Earth or humans, just ask. Oh, and fair warning, I might try to rope some of you into trying out some human games. Anyone up for a round of truth or dare?
The class looked at each other, a mixture of excitement and trepidation on their faces. They didn't know what truth or dare was, but coming from a human, it was bound to be an adventure. As they filed out of the classroom, chattering excitedly about their new classmate, one thing was clear: life at Galactic High was about to get a whole lot more interesting.